see the shows that we saw this time around. Well, Benjamin, what do you think?
So Eva and I went to see I Need That, now playing at the American Airlines Theater. It stars Danny DeVito and his daughter, Lucy DeVito. Very simple story. Is it something we needed to see? Not necessarily. I rated a happy face, like it was heartfelt. I enjoyed it. But is it the show of the season? No. Is it the performance of a lifetime? No. I Need That tells the story of one man, Sam, no last name, and his inability to let go of the physical items in his life. You can't help, as an audience member, but feel bad for him, maybe even a little anxious, just for how much he entraps himself in his house and his personal belongings. He's unable to accept help from his daughter, Amelia, or his friend Foster. The father daughter relationship is really well portrayed in that it is actually played by a father and daughter, Danny DeVito and his daughter, Lucy DeVito. The portrayal is sympathetic and frustrating. Sam, again, can't get rid of anything, so you're just relentlessly feeling frustrated by that. And Lucy, as Sam's daughter, is equally compelling. She's able to convey that frustration and love simultaneously and hold both to be true. There are moments where I felt the show dragged, particularly in one scene where Sam's playing the board game Sorry. He's playing it by himself after a fight with his daughter Lucy around getting rid of it. It felt unnecessarily long, and the overall pace of the play I felt could be tightened. Otherwise, the acting across the board from all principal cast members, including Ray Anthony Thomas, were really well done.
The scene of him playing Sorry was a really good metaphor, if you think about it. And we should say that this was written by Teresa Rebeck, who really is such a good character driven writer. And of course, you have the delightful director, Moritz von Stulpennagel, who is just great at comic and touching things. And I want to say more about Ray Anthony Thomas because he's this real, you think he's this wonderful, caring friend. And you know, they've been together forever and he seems supportive, but maybe there's more to everybody than you realize. And also the fact is he just lost his wife, and you know the reason everyone's so anxious for him to clean up is because he's about to be evicted if he doesn't, you know, clean up his literally his mess. But see, I could relate to this, and my son should have seen this with me because he would have related to it too. But I like to tell people I'm a sentimental hoarder. I mean, you look at something and that's just it. Everything he picked up had a story behind it. And like I say to Alfie, some of these things are valuable. You could get money out of them. I don't want to just throw them out. In fact, Benjamin, you yourself were able to sell his Pokemon backpack for some money for us. So you see, some man's trash is another person's treasure. So I could understand everybody's point of view. And it was such a touching, wonderful play, beautifully done. And we should say that the set created beautifully done. Alexander Dodge was amazing. I mean, so much to look at. It was I had no qualms about this at all. I loved it from start to finish. It was just heartbreaking to me, and I just loved it to pieces. And I'm giving it a major happy face.
Make Me Gorgeous, presented at the Triangle Productions at the Playhouse 46 at St. Luke's in Manhattan, is a fabulously hysterical one-man show written by Donnie, and that is his only name listed, with additional material by the man who stars in the show, Wade McCollum, and it is directed by Donnie. This is the story rather of a man named Kenneth Marlowe. Kenneth Marlowe was a young man who came from Middletown, America, and basically this is a story of how he got in a roller coaster and just did not stop. Kenneth Marlowe was a drag queen. He became a beautician, a singer, a dancer, and most notably, he became a male madam. He was running an answering service that gave a little more than messages. So this incredibly insane life, which ended with Kenneth Marlowe transitioning from male to female, was presented by Wade McCullum in this one-man show. And Wade is a force of nature. He has so much enthusiasm, so much charisma and energy. It was impossible not to get swept up into this whirlwind that he created. So I definitely give it a happy face, and it was really just an evening to blow your wig off.
Taking place this weekend at the Tank is a original Christmas comedy, Chloe Saves Christmas, produced by Miles Mandwell. This show promises to delight audiences as they follow Chloe throughout her misadventures during SantaCon weekend in New York City. This show is full of antics, it's over the top, you see a lot of questionable morals on display, as well as bizarre sexual content. So go check it out. The show's written by Dr. Flappy Manders, DDR, promising to be just as hysterical as the author's name. It promises to delight audiences and get in the holiday spirit.
And speaking of wacky Christmas stories, there is an Axemas Story with music by Anthony DeAngelis, lyrics by Patrick Spencer, and a book by Charlie O'Leary. It's a throwback to those beloved old-fashioned fringe shows with silly plots and songs, the breaking of the fourth wall, and lots of puns, theater references, and in this case, 80s nostalgia. The trees in Treetown are very Christian and fervently believe in Jesus and Farmer Todd, which oddly rhymes with God. They are too busy sticking it to each other and getting ready for the Christmas pageant to notice their friends disappearing, especially with actors doubling and tripling in the roles. The town is run by Mayor Maple and his wife, Mrs. Frazier, who is basically the whole school, and boy, does she love to school her husband. They have two children, Buck, the town bully, and Noel, who is luckily a very skeptical person. Buck is going out with Virginia. Small Paul, the puniest tree, who everyone needles, has a secret crush on Virginia. Chuck and Fern are a couple with ever-changing branches to their character. Noel gets suspicious when Chuck and Fern are missing for days. No one will listen to her. She gets Small Paul to help her by talking to his grandfather, Old Paul, at the old folks' home. He furthers their worries. Will they be able to save everyone before the evil humans get their chop? Don't cancel culture me for taking a cheap shot at a bad pun. I had the best time at this show. You may have noticed that I love puns and wordplay, and this show's Patrick Spencer's lyrics and Charlie O'Leary's books were brimming with all the trimmings with them. Anthony DeAngelis' music had a driving beat and catchy melodies that energized you and made you want to dance tremendously. As a short person, I especially identified as Small Paul, who had that Rudy hero quality that may have been in the 90s, but he was all 80s save the day. This was an exceptional, exquisite, exciting show. Happy Face Plus. This is Sasha Clarke's review of Stereophonic. David Ajmi's Stereophonic takes place in a 1976-77 California recording studio set up with a huge 32-track soundboard in the foreground and the actual recording booth behind the glass wall further upstage, meticulously put together by David Zinn. We meet the crew, the sound engineer Grover and his assistant Charlie, who barely know what they are doing and are in the presence of rock royalty or something like that, as this group has descended from England to come to Sausalito, California to record their big break. Eventually, the manager and then the other band members stumble in, quite literally. Sex, drugs, rock and roll abound, with a huge sack of cocaine being passed around along with joints and cigarettes. We find that there are firmly established relationships among the group and definitely a lot of egos. During the course of this year or so, we are taken on a journey of creating an album. For Sasha Clarke, it was too long, especially the beginning sequences. Yes, the awkward silence and pregnant pauses are necessary, but too much of anything can simply deflect from the message at hand. Overall, though, it is a comprehensive look at a particular time in contemporary music culture and is enjoyable as such, and she gives it a mixed face.
I would not give it a mixed face. I enjoyed this show. I got to the theater, and when I arrived, found out that it was runtime was over 3 hours, my jaw dropped. I was in complete disbelief. I did not find myself to be sitting there bored watching the clock go by, or even feeling like I was sitting through over 3 hours worth of a show. While I agree it could find areas to be cut, it was a very enjoyable experience. You're watching an album be created in real time, and I want that album. I loved this music. I loved the talent of the cast, both performance in the studio and the chemistry that they portrayed of the band members outside as well.
Oh, and I should say, I love the playwright, David Ajami. He is one of my favorite playwrights. So you know it's going to be really, really well written. But anyway, give it a happy face minus with me like coughing. I'm going to give it a coughing happy face minus.
I would emulate that. I give it a happy face minus. Playing at the Public Theater through December 23rd, Mary Catherine Nagel's Manahatta was an excellent piece of theater. I was disappointed when I was working at Yale that I missed the opportunity to see its debut there. So I was really excited when I learned that it was taking on a new form in life at the Public. This was an incredible piece of theater because it really contextualized the land that I live on. It juxtaposes 17th century life as a Native American living on the island of Manhattan, where your concept of ownership is everything's collectively shared, right? Just as the air is to be breathed by everybody, how could you own that? How could you own the land we're standing on? So you juxtapose that with the then 21st century financial crisis that's caused by the housing market, I thought was brilliant. It really felt reminiscent of the Lehman trilogy. In fact, because Lehman Brothers fails in this play as well, where Lehman trilogy ended abruptly and dramatically at that 21st century, I feel like we got a little bit more of that with Manahatta. It put Native American actors and characters at the forefront of a show, which is not an experience that I'm used to. So I really like that elevation and celebration of a disenfranchised community. And again, living as a Manhattanite, having a mother who is a real estate agent and sells real estate in Manhattan, I thought it was a really thought-provoking experience to be able to watch how different people view and see real estate and how they interact with the island of Manhattan. I give it a happy face.
Here we are with Stephen Cole, who has finally put down his obsession with Mary Martin and Ethel Merman into a book called Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And it's this wonderful time travel story. So it's like every single theater geek's like fantasy.
Well, thank you. That's a great testament to read it. It's not that long, so that's a good thing. You can read it from cover to cover. And there's also an audiobook that's coming out at the same time. It is performed by the great Anita Gillette. You can hear it. So I'll get that to you also, Eva, because she brings in a whole other level to it by playing all the characters, by being Ethel and Mary and all of those people. And she's pretty amazing.
So she's got that whole musical, rhythm going like Mary and Ethel would have.
Oh yeah, and of course she knew Ethel as well as I did. I was lucky enough to know her in her last years of her life. I knew Mary also. Ethel was a real friend who I saw a lot in the last 2 years of her life, and Mary I corresponded with, and we spoke on the phone. But I wouldn't call us great friends, but certainly acquaintances. And we both commiserated when Ethel died. Mary said, if the great merman could die, anything can happen. It's true. Okay, so, my obsessions have become this book, but they've also become two other shows. One called Merman's Apprentice, which we recorded with Clea Blackhurst and did at Birdland, and it was premiered in San Francisco and won an award for best score there. And then about 10 years ago, on Mary's 100th birthday, we did a tribute to her called Inventing Mary Martin at the York, which was really a wonderful experience, because her grandchildren and her daughter and her great grandchildren all came to the show and all loved it. And it was, I got to direct it and write it, and Jason Gra was in it, and Emily Skinner and Lynn Halliday and Cameron Adams. And it was a great experience. But I thought I had left Mary and Ethel behind, except a few years ago, I was sitting on the beach and I thought, what can I do that's not a musical? And I had written 5 nonfiction books, including Marty Nixon's memoirs. And I thought, maybe it's time to turn to the 2 of them in fiction, in a historical fiction way. And it took a while till it hit as a time travel piece, when Mikey, who is Michael Marvin Minkus from Brooklyn, New York, gets to be the central character and go through a time portal in Ethel's closet in her apartment and wind up in 1938 with in Sophie Tufker's dressing room at the Imperial Theater. It was a blast to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite as everything happens. The novel, I couldn't be happier with it at this point. And I was helped along the way by one wonderful writer. Her name is Rita Lakin. And when I brought the original drafts to her and I said, what's wrong with this? She put her finger right on it. And she's the one who told me to invent Michael Marvin Minkus, Mikey himself, and put him at the center of this whole thing, and to make him a little bit like me, which makes him a little bit like every theater geek who wants to live their lives through the history of musical theater. So I think this is going to hit home for a lot of people.
And how did you come up with Mary 2 as sort of your time travel guide?
When I went to visit Ethel, and I did, in that last scene where Mikey does go into Ethel's bedroom, really happened. I won't give too much away, but when I went to see her, she had a nurse, and she told me her name was Mary, and she said, to not confuse it with Mary Martin, I call her Mary too. And that stuck with me all these years. And I decided to expand her into this. She's really a magical character. She's my favorite character in the piece, because she shows up at every time and she knows exactly what's going on, and she helps him through each portal to get to the next time, and then eventually disappears when he doesn't need her anymore. So I don't know, she just kind of grew out of a real person that I knew for 5 minutes, and that happened.
Like your fairy godmother.
In a way, and I think she's just one of my favorite characters. And when we do the movie, and I think there should be a TV movie, I think it's somebody like Queen Latifah. She's so interesting and sassy and able to know everything, and she doesn't let him get away with anything, and she pushes him through doors. And that's sort of the whole theme of the show too, being pushed through these doors and portals and ways to get somewhere, because eventually he gets somewhere. He, in real time in the 1980s, he winds up finally getting out of his mother's basement and living a life.
It's sort of like he's stuck in time and this time travel unsticks him.
I think that's true. I think it's true. I mean, it happens, and it teaches him a great lesson. I think the other great wow moment when I was writing this was when I thought he should meet himself as a little boy. And he does. He goes back, and the real climax of the story is when a 25-year-old meets a 12-year-old and helps him get through one of the worst times of his life. Don't we wish we could all do that for ourselves?
Oh, goodness gracious. Yes. It's sort of almost, I mean, the thing is, it brings to mind all your favorite kind of things like Big and Portrait of Jenny and Back to the Future. I mean, all those wonderful time travel stories but this has such a nice different twist to it. And of course, it's filled with people I absolutely adore. So
That was fun to do. Who's who in Mary and Ethel land, we call it. Because yeah, we have Josh Logan, we have Rodgers and Hammerstein, we have Irving Berlin, but people like Leland Hayward who produced South Pacific and Call Me Madam and the Ford 50th anniversary show. It's so interesting. And Jerome Robbins is very key. And we bring in the blacklist and the fact that he named names. And of course Ethel's friends, some of whom I knew, like Maria Karnilova, the great the original Golden Fiddler on the Roof, and B'nai Venuta, her best friend who had replaced her in Anything Goes in 1935. They all show up at a hen party, when Ethel is going to lose the Tony Award to Mary Martin.
Yeah, I had no idea that they were fixed and everybody knew who was going to win before. I mean, that's just it was full of nuggets of information that I had no idea about. And you actually managed to humanize Jerry Roberts, which is very difficult to do.
Oh yeah. It was a blast. I really enjoyed doing it. Now,
I could talk with you forever, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. I only have a 28-minute show, unfortunately. So,
okay.
but anyway, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm so glad you finally wrote this in a novel because it's hard to see theater. Theater's so ephemeral, but a book.
And we can get it on Amazon. So that's great. Plus, always listen to Anita Gillette because she's spectacular.
Oh, I
Thank
know. I
you.
saw her in Cabaret back in the day when I was 12. So, anyway, thank you so much for coming on. It totally
Thank
does.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Urban Stages is starting their Winter Rhythms Festival, and we saw the opening Nights at the Algonquin, musical direction by Alex Rybeck, directed by Sarah Louise Lazarus, written and hosted by Michael Colby, who as a kid went to a lot of these cabaret events with his father, I believe. And they were wonderful people who had performed from the 1980s up until it closed recently. Karen Akers, Natalie Douglas, Jeff Harner, Mark Nadler with KT Sullivan. It was just really wonderful. And there were some taped anecdotes. Let's see, Andrea Markovici had a wonderful thing about the Algonquin cat, Matilda, intruding and meowing during one of her songs. I really enjoyed this immensely.
Well, Michael Colby's grandparents owned the Algonquin and wrote a book called The Algonquin Kid. And Michael Colby himself is a brilliant lyricist. So it was just a family affair. And it was just so wonderful. And to see Karen Akers perform every year, Drew Gilchrist and I, with High Drama, would always go see Karen Akers at the Oak Room. That was our thing. We looked forward to it every year. And when the Oak Room closed, all I could think of, what will happen to Karen Akers? Oh no! So anyway, so I was very. It was the opening night. We all drank champagne and toasted, and the songs were beautiful and moving and funny and just touching, and it was marvelous. But there's going to be a lot more other programs going on at Winter Rhythms, and it's going on to the 17th. So you still have 2 nights to catch whatever marvelous things they put on, which I will have in my listings on Facebook. I'm giving this a major happy face.
Again, absolutely.
Sabbath Theater, written by Ariel Levy and John Turturro, adapted from the novel by Philip Roth, is about an aging, out-of-work puppeteer and his overactive libido, equally matched by his Yugoslavian mistress, who takes lovers because they are there. Neither of them care too much about the people they are married to, who provide the security, but not the lust they both require. What happens when you lose your main squeeze and death seems preferable? Philip Roth has turned into Woody Allen with his obsession with sex and death. Disgusting as some of the sexual exploits are, it still becomes mesmerizing in the skilled hands of Elizabeth Marvel and John Turturro, with Jason Kravitz as the buffer of reason. Despite trying to dramatize this with the help of Alex Vasco Koch's kinetic projections, it still has a novel feel to it. As I happen to be a fan of Philip Roth and these actors, this isn't a problem for me. Happy face minus. Lamisi Isaac's A Good Day to Me, Not You, pretty much sums up the narrator's life. She wanted to be an orthodontist, but vertigo put a kibosh on that. Can't be drilling a tooth with the spins, she tells us. Instead, she becomes a dental technician, filling in dental molds, but got fired for altering them to be perfect. She took the casting material so she could make molds of her teeth and turn them into perfection. Without a job and with insurmountable student debts, she ends up moving to St. Agnes, which is basically a Christian dorm run by nuns. Beforehand, she'd been looking after her adorable 5-year-old nephew, who she practically raised after her sister had died in childbirth. Out of nowhere, while she is in this rut, her mother offers her money to have a child somehow, some way, before it becomes too late. Deep down, she always wanted a kid, but hadn't been in a serious relationship in 10 years, and she is over 40 now. What lengths will she pursue now that she has the possibility to have a child? What will happen when her brother in law takes her nephew with him to California? This is surprisingly funny, all too relatable, and quite heartbreaking at times. From Miss Isaac's previous shows, I know what a master storyteller she is. We get a clear portrait of all the different characters that make up this tale of woe, hopefulness, desperation, and finally acceptance of the vagaries of life. Happy face. And on our next show, I'm going to give you a snippet of reviews we will be reviewing, which will be Savitt Singh Lowe's Madwomen of the West, starring Caroline Aaron, Brooke Adams, Marilou Henner, and Melanie Mayron, where secrets are revealed, veneers are cracked, but friendships endure as we crack up and tear up over these fierce women. Ends December 31st. Happy face. Also ending December 31st is Brian Field's translation, which has British soldiers coming to a small village in Ireland in 1933 to map out and anglicize all the Irish towns with the help of one of the former villagers betraying his roots. That is not the only betrayal causing dire consequences. Two happy faces from Mark and me. Closing December 17th, I Can Get It For You wholesale at Classic Stage Company, Scene Partners at Vineyard Theater, Spain at Second Stage. Closing December 23rd is The Life and Times of Michael Kay at St. Anne's Warehouse, Till Death at the Abington. Closing December 24th is Sleeping Beauty at Abrams Art Center, Lone Star at Theater Row. And at 5959 E59, we've got Unconfined closing December 22nd. Adrift, A Medieval Wayward Folly is closing December 24th. And at the New Victory is the Cambodian Circus, closing December 30th. And the Gardens of Annuncia, closing December 31st at the Mitzi E. Newhouse at Lincoln Center.